We shall be moving on to our next presentation by Ms. Gracie Vella and Ms. Sharon Borch-Kembry, who will be taking us through the use of AAC beyond schooling. Let me introduce the speakers. So Sharon Borch-Kembry currently works as a senior assistive technology practitioner with ACTU. Her background in occupational therapy and interest in computer science and inclusion led her to further her professional development, focusing on assistive technology and its role in facilitating participation, early childhood interventions, and autism. She holds a master's degree in inclusive education and communities with the University of Malta. Ms. Borch-Kembry has published a co-authored article as part of the AAT 2015 conference. She is also a co-author of 2 research presentations on the implementation of AAC systems with children with autism for Isaac. Ms. Borch-Kembry co-authored a poster presentation presented in Isaac 2018 focusing on ACTU service delivery. Ms. Gracie Vella is a qualified occupational therapist who graduated with a Bachelor of Science from the University of Malta in 2019. She has been working with Children and Inspire Foundation since June 2019. Gracie is currently reading for a Master's of Mental Health Studies at the University of Malta, and she is also currently following a course in sensory integration. Sharon and Gracie, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the introduction. I will be sharing as well the presentation. So hopefully. Okay, is the presentation? Mela, can you see the presentation? Okay, so myself and Gracie, we're going to present this local study which we conducted, and it is entitled Service Users and Caregivers Perspectives of the Impact of Augmentative and Alternative Communication Devices on Young People Occupations. In fact, as I told you, it is a research conducted in the Maltese context and provides a valuable contribution to the field of AAC in the context of assistive technology, both from a local perspective and as an international perspective, because little research is actually available within this area. So, participation in occupations. This is the bread and butter of occupational therapists and why it is important. A person engages in several types of occupations across a lifespan, and this includes activities of daily living, play, leisure, and social activities, as well as work and education-related activities. Participation in meaningful occupations gives us a sense of identity and sense of competence. It increases self-determination and thus has an impact on our well-being. It is an expression of who we are and an opportunity to understand more about ourselves. So it is a process, that it gives us a way to express who we are, but also in the process we learn more about ourselves. So occupations and children with disabilities. Law, Patrick, King and Harley shows that children with disabilities find it more challenging to participate in their occupations as compared with other non-disabled children. Thus, they are very prone to what we call occupational deprivation. Research shows that persons with disabilities tend to be more sedentary and their participation in activities is less complex and significantly influenced by the environment. In a way that if the environment is not accessible, for example, they can't access certain activities, either because of the physical, it could be also because of attitudinal barriers, or it could be because of the activities not accessible to them, then obviously we have more occupational deprivation. The use of assistive technology creates opportunities for children with disabilities to be active in their community through engagement in meaningful occupations, especially in the areas of education, communication, and play activities, as research shows us. So assistive technology is a very good bridge to help these children with disabilities to be able to participate. So since 2007, AAC system with the advancement in technology has progressed to be based on computer platforms, and this enabled AAC users to use their AAC system for more than just a voice. So actually we moved from what we call, we all still have those what we call dedicated AAC, but now since they are on a platform, on a computer platform, we can do much more. In fact, a number of studies has showed how AAC devices helps AAC users to participate in academic activities, in employment, play and pleasure activities, and social media. Participation in these activities was not possible prior to the use of the AAC system. Now, since language is embedded in most human activities, as even Dr. May has suggested as well and mentioned, the AAC system really opens the window for children with disabilities to engage in various occupations. So in a research done by Dalton and Hyatt, they discuss how the AAC system helps to teenagers to show their knowledge and potential, as often people believe that all AAC users have cognitive impairments, and this we saw it also discussed in the panel, in the parents panel, that the people out there, sometimes even educators, because I have seen it, they think that because the person does not speak, or because they have physical disability, they think that they have cognitive impairment and they are not understanding, or they can't participate in the community. Limitations, however, does exist even when using AAC, such as the language, and we have the Maltese context, so we don't have available robust languages in the Maltese language, voice and speed of conveying the message, reliability of the device, ease of using the AAC device. Sometimes some devices are more difficult to use than others. So what was the aim of the study? It was to identify what occupations the users of an AAC device are able to carry out, their level of satisfaction when carrying out these occupations, and barriers encountered from both their own perspectives and that of their caregivers. And in fact, now I'm going to give the floor to Gracian so that she can explain further the rationale of the study, the methodology, and the findings, and also the implications of the study.
Thank you, Sharon. As she mentioned, I will be discussing my study. So, the rationale for the study, since no detailed research has been carried out regarding the facilitators and barriers from the view of the children caregivers. There's also minimal understanding of the leisure experiences of children or young people, including those using the AAC devices, especially information from the user's own perspective. There's also limited research with regards to the Maltese AAC user population. Since research in this field is very limited, professionals working in this field will have limited evidence to guide them in the intervention stage. Therefore, the study will help OTs working in this field to be more knowledgeable about the use of AAC and how they affect the young people's occupational functioning. So the design we chose for the study was a multiple case study approach. The participants of the study were recruited through the ACTU. This unit provides services to special need clients who require assistive technology. The sample of 5 users and their caregivers was chosen using purposive sampling. One of the users and his or her caregiver participated in the pilot study. The inclusion criteria for participating in the study included AAC users between the ages of 10 and 24 years who attended an educational institution, had physical and communication disabilities. However, they could communicate about their occupations, the barriers, and as well the feelings about using the high-tech technology device. as well as the caregiver needed to also participate in the study. So we have 5 users and then their respective caregivers. Data collected was through individual semi-structured interviews, and they were carried out 1 per user and 1 per caregiver. Data collection and analysis was collected by the researcher of the study, and each interview was audio recorded and transcribed. So now I will be discussing the results of the study. As you can see on the screen, there are 2 tables, one of them describing the perspectives of the caregivers and one of them describing the perspective of users with regards to the occupations that they were able to carry out by using the device. As you can see, with regards to leisure activities, all caregivers and users mentioned that they or their children can use the device for leisure activities. They specifically mentioned that they use social media. Also, others mentioned that they can able to take photos or play games. In fact, one caregiver mentioned, "My child carries cooking or sitting or pet sitting or grooming on the device." School and education-related activities. All the users, both attending mainstream and those attending special schools, as well as their caregiver, all mentioned that they are able to carry out all school-related activities. They have mentioned, for example, that they can carry out homework, schoolwork, as well as writing emails. Also, one of the participants mentioned that her child is able to take exams using the device. When it comes to ADLs, since participants in the study have complex physical disabilities, they cannot necessarily carry out the ADLs independently. For example, when one of the users was asked what activities of daily living he or she can carry out, this participant mentioned, "I'm hungry." This shows that this participant perceives the ability to communicate about her needs as an ADL. This also shows that language is embedded in all occupations. Also, half of the participants mentioned that their children use the device to communicate, whilst others use it only to communicate with non-family members or when they are not understood through sign language. When it comes to social interaction, as mentioned that they use the device to socially interact with most of the people that they come in contact to, and mostly they use social media. However, they communicate also with friends, teachers, family, and also non-family members. Now you can see 2 tables, each having the information about the satisfaction with regards to using the AAC devices. The first one describing the caregivers and the second one the users. As you can see, all participants stated that they are satisfied with all the occupations that they or their children can carry out by making use of the device. Apart from this, the user's quality of life was also enhanced by making use of the device. When asked about satisfaction, one caregiver specifically mentioned, "It was everything for my child. Without it, my child felt lost." Whilst then a user mentioned, "I have the world in front of me," by making use of the device. There was also several barriers that came up from this study. The first table, we have the perspective of the caregivers, and the second table, we have the perspective of the users with regards to the barriers that they faced. So, societal factors, 3 participants mentioned that the way that others talk to the user can be a barrier. And also, sometimes society underestimates the AAC user's ability. Also, one added that she feels that the device is not accepted in the Maltese society. Language used was another barrier amongst participants, in which they mentioned that since the device only has 1 language, it was difficult for them to communicate in Maltese with Maltese-speaking individuals. Also, a caregiver mentioned that her child was excluded from Maltese lessons at school. Pronunciation, was also a barrier in which some users mentioned that they were not being able to be understood. Time to generate a message was another barrier in which some participants mentioned that, for example, the teacher doesn't give them enough time to answer a question in class, or also the peers themselves not give them enough time to communicate. Training in schools, in fact, to users who attend the mainstream school and their respective caregiver mentioned that lack of training to teachers in school is another barrier that they have encountered. With regards to the ease of use, one caregiver mentioned that the device is heavy and therefore it cannot be taken to certain places, whilst another mentioned that when the device is mounted to the wheelchair and there are places that are not wheelchair accessible, it's very difficult for the person to use the device. On the other hand, one participant mentioned that she finds it difficult to buy certain equipment for the device, such as the stylus in Malta. On the other hand, another mentioned that there are certain applications that couldn't be installed on the device. For example, one caregiver said that it was difficult for her child to perform mathematics, and she stated, for example, measurements used to be difficult for him. Also, another thing that it was mentioned was with the fact that there was a particular participant that uses the device using switches, and the user needed to communicate with her LSC, for example, that she needs the switches to be able to communicate with her. And there were certain times where for example, the LSC was not available, and so the user had to wait to communicate her needs. The last barrier that was mentioned was with regard to reliability. One caregiver mentioned that the device indicates, for example, that the battery will last for several hours, but eventually it will not. Whilst another mentioned that the time to fix the device was another barrier. The results of the following discussion, results will lead to the following discussion. So the first point is with regards to leisure activities. As already mentioned, they were able, all the participants were able to engage in the leisure activities, and this matched the results of another study in which the parents have reported that the users can have social media, can have access to social media, and can also have a personal block. One adolescent in the study carried out by Karan and Light mentioned, "I like that I can show off, that you can show off your things like television shows, movies, music, etc." The results of my study also matched that of Holmkins et al. With the caregivers of the study mentioning that the device helped them engage in play activities without the help of others. Otherwise, such would not have been possible due to their physical disabilities. Also, as stated by another researcher, virtual technology has increased AAC device users' chances of being able to play games using different methods. When it comes to educational activities as facilitated by the device, in the study of Bailey et al., it was concluded that adolescents can carry out most of their school activities. Similarly, another researcher found that without the use of assistive high technologies, users would not be able to handle mainstream school and would therefore be excluded. And these matched the results of my study. The other two users who attend a special school stated that they are able to carry out school activities through the AAC device. And this was different to the study carried out by other researchers who found that children with disabilities who make use of the AAC device and attend special school are still experiencing limitations to participate in several activities. When it comes to ADLs, in the study of Holmkins et al., participants mentioned that users were able to communicate their needs and complain about what they do not like, and this matched results of the current study. For social interaction, As already mentioned in the results, some users use the device were not being understood through sign language or with non-family members. Conversely, one researcher reported that users could not effectively use the device with non-familiar people. The findings of Hayen et al. Matched the results of my study, in which the users in his study felt irritated when they were not able to go online and use social media, since it helped them to be better understood. Also, social media increased opportunities to communicate with others, since it limits the barriers encountered during face-to-face interactions. The study of other researchers concluded that children who use computer-based assistive communication were able to answer their teacher and participate in both the lessons and in activities with their peers. And these findings resonate with the current study. Level of satisfaction. Similarly to the parents' perspective in the local study, Vestoyan et al. Also reported that the parents of eye gaze AAC users were satisfied with using the device for communication purposes. Adult users in another study mentioned that their quality of life has improved significantly with the AAC device. In fact, one of my participants, one of the caregivers, mentioned it is everything for my child. My child feels lost without it. Now I will be discussing a bit about the barriers encountered. When it comes to societal factors, as Smith and Colony concluded, the attitudes and perceptions of the communication partners were collectively a major factor that affect the success of device use, which is similar to what was found in my study. An assumption that is made by society without those about those who use an AAC technology is that they are generally cognitively impaired. The result obtained from the study by Crisp et al. In fact suggested that one of the barriers to success was the negative reaction from others. So when it comes to language, voice, and the speed of the AAC device, the results of the current study matched that of Lund and Light, in which it was concluded that the participants find it difficult to use the device due to it having only one language to communicate with. Bailey and colleagues commented specifically on the frustration encountered when the device mispronounces words. And also this is very similar to the Maltese context, where we do not have yet a robust AAC vocabulary in the Maltese language. Time to generate a message was also another barrier in the study, and this matched results of other researchers. Participants in the study of Crisp et al. Mentioned that teachers did not have the time to work with the device, as was found in the current study with regards to the users attending mainstream school. Training in schools, lack of trained educators in using the AAC system in the mainstream classroom is another barrier mentioned by the caregivers of the study. And in fact, one mother stated they do not even have an idea about devices in schools. And this finding matched that of Crisp et al. Ease of use. One participant in the current study mentioned that the device is heavy and not taken to certain places due to environmental accessibility issues. And this was similar to what other researchers found. One participant in the study referred to the unavailability of certain equipment off the shelf locally due to small market. In fact, she stated sometimes a shop imports them and then stops importing them because they are not items that are oftenly used. And no previous study has reported a similar finding. Users in the study of Koran and Light commented that it was not possible to access all social media applications, either because of problems related to motor control or features within the sites themselves. Other researchers also concluded that the AAC users were not always able to operate the device due to their physical impairments, as was found in my study. The last barrier that was mentioned was reliability, in which battery life was also found to be a barrier, as it tends to dissipate much faster than it indicates in the manual. And this findings match that of Cooper et al. Other researchers concluded that users spend a lot of time without the device when it needs to be repaired, as was found in the study. So, clinical implications from the study. The OTs should take into consideration the client's body functions and structure, as well as their performance skills and patterns. Apart from this, the OT should also consider the context in which occupations will be carried out. Training and educating all individuals that the user interacts with will be very beneficial, especially in the school setting, the teachers and LSCs. Apart from this, the public should also be educated as to the true cognitive abilities of the individuals who make use of the AAC device. This study also suggests the need to be client-centered through the OT process and to always listen to the perspective of both the user and caregiver, since each client is unique. Clinicians should keep in mind the concerns of the client and of the family members during the intervention to ensure that the goals are being met. So as a conclusion, the findings from the study show that the AAC device is used in most of the required and the desired occupations that the users engage in. This means that it allows the users to participate in leisure activities, education, ADLs, which otherwise it would have not been possible. Apart from this, it also helps the users to socially interact with other people. Furthermore, participants in the study found barriers depending on the way they access the device, the features of the device, the different environments that they carry out their occupations in, and the people they communicate with. It was found that individuals that attend mainstream school experience more barriers than those who attend special schools. However, all users and caregivers in the study were overall satisfied with the occupations that they or their children are able to carry out by making use of the device. Thank you for listening, and I give the floor to Jonathan. To me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace Ann and Sharon, for a very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed listening to the research you carried out and how you were able to map the AT experiences of local children and young adults who are using AAC and how they're using it in ways that goes beyond the typical communication and how it's now moving into education and leisure and the achievement of activities of daily living. This really links very well to the next session that's coming up. Really proud to present two young people who have used ACTU services and who are going to be talking about their own real life experiences with the use of AAC. And the first one is Kim. Kim's going to be telling us about how she uses technology to support her studies. And I'm saying technology here because she's using a combination of devices. Firstly, she is using an AAC device to support her communication, and she will tell us how she uses that also in other aspects. And also she uses mainstream tablet technology, something maybe we haven't touched on so much today, and how she is adapting that to be able to talk about the things, to be able to do the things she needs to do in MCAST. I would like to point out that the visuals on her presentations have all been done by her, because I don't think she says it in her presentation, and some of the challenges to adapt are quite interesting. So, Jonathan, if you can put up that presentation, please. Or is Kim here? Okay.
Yes, Kim has just joined us now. Thank you, Kim, for joining us. and for giving us this presentation about your personal experience with using AAC. We're going to proceed with the video that Kim Parascandolo has very kindly prepared for us to present during this online conference.
I am. Can we Paras handle it? And today, I will. He. He. R. E. Present. Presenting. My. E. X. Experience. Up. Out. My. AAC device. Is. Still. Helping. Me. With. N. Y. My. E. D. Education. Full. M. Mcast. Hi, I'm Kim. Kimberly Paras-Candlin, and today I will be presenting my experience of how my AAC device is still helping me with my education for MCAST.
Mike, may I please?
Mike, yes. Right. So, Kim, thank you very much for that introduction. It's great to see you using your device, and I'm sure for some people they'd be very interested to see what actually happens on the screen and how long it takes for you to be able to communicate something using your device. Now what we're going to do is show you a presentation that Kim has already prepared, in which she will be talking about what happens, how she uses her technology to attend her studies in MCAST. That was pre-prepared for us yesterday. Okay, just waiting for this to come up. And as I said earlier, any of the visuals that are on the slides, they've all been made by Kim as part of her course. Okay, I think it's coming up now.
My name is Kimberly Paras-Candlin, and I am 17 years old. Achieving my dream. Currently, I am an MCAST student doing my second year and diploma in media, which I am enjoying and learning a lot. This course includes graphical design, photography, animation, visual and contextual studies, and moving image, amongst other subjects. How do I work? I have mobility problems, which includes dystonia that triggers unwanted movements. This makes it hard for me to work with my device using normal keyboard and mouse, but instead I use 2 switches. Although this system is slow and time-consuming, I can handle anything in my computer, from communication to more technical things like graphical design. Graphical design. To do graphical design, one needs a lot of precision and accuracy. Drawing with switches is possible, but I think it is more difficult than using the mouse, because moving the cursor will take much longer. But where there's a will, there's a way. Some shortcut keys programmed in the new voice software will help a lot. Graphical design. My biggest hurdle to start studying this subject is downloading the software, which is Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. This is because it needs a lot of space and RAM from the device, which I don't have, so I had to delete some software that I am not using at the moment. In fact, this is a drawback when using dedicated devices because you can't change the hard disk. Some of my designs. Christmas card 2019. Collage printed on a cushion for my best friend. Collage for Father's Day printed on canvas. DVD cover and poster. This was a school assignment. Photography. Taking photos by myself. I thought that it was impossible for me, but I was wrong. To make this possible, a lot of meetings and research had to be done. With the help of the lecturers, actor and my family, we could finally buy the equipment because this was something new for everyone. Photography. To take photos, I use an iPad Pro, a DSLR camera and a Bluetooth switch. I connect the camera with my iPad Pro through Wi-Fi so I can take photographs remotely. This is possible if you download an application that is compatible with your camera, usually provided by the manufacturer. To use my Bluetooth switch, I connected with my iPad Pro via Bluetooth. Photography. Photography is more challenging than any other subject, because certain photography requires to go to different places. So, to make this possible, I have all their equipment mounted on my power wheelchair. Mounted camera. This can be an advantage if used to capture portraits, still life, landscapes, or nature, as the mount will work as a tripod. But it can also be a disadvantage when capturing panning technique photos. The application gives access to most of the camera functions like change sensor sensitivity, adjustment of shutter speed, adjustment of aperture, focusing, zooming, capture photos and download images. Although I can do most settings of the camera remotely from my iPad, there are still certain functions that has to be done manually from the camera, like turn on the flash, turn on and off the camera, and change the mode. This means that I have to tell my carer what I need to change, which will be a bit more difficult because when I am taking photos it is impossible to have my communication device mounted on my wheelchair too. Some of my photographs. Animation. I just started studying animation, which has the precision like graphical design and the art of photography. Animation. I still don't know what problems I may find, as I am new in this field, but I'm sure I will find a way. I am going to show you my first stop-motion animation that has around 80 photographs, and although it is not perfect, I am happy with my first attempt. Visual and contextual studies. This subject requires a lot of research and some practical teamwork. With my device, I can access more than one program at a time like any other computer, so I can research and present all my assignments with my device. I can work with Word document or PowerPoint presentation while using Google, so I can copy images or text and do the Harvard referencing. Conclusion. Although the technology has evolved very fast in the last decade, the challenges are endless. In the future, I don't know what is going to happen, but I am optimistic and willing to try new technology. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Kim. It was really wonderful to see how you've progressed in your studies and how you're managing to find ways to use assistive technology to do what you want to do in life. And I think this whole segment, Sharon and Gracie Ann's presentation, Kim and Kurt, really this is what we're talking about today. We're talking about how people can achieve what they want, regardless of their disabilities, and finding ways to do that. Next, I'd like to just introduce our second presenter, who is an AAC user. This is Kurt Micallef, and we're kind of moving on a step now because Kim is still studying, but Kurt has actually finished his studies, kind of. We'll hear more about that later. And now he's actually entered the world of employment. So he's going to tell us about how he uses his technology in the workplace and a little bit about his life story.
I am Kurt McAuliffe and I am 25 years old. I have cerebral palsy and I use assistive augmentative communication technology every day. I love anything to do with computers. My latest project is a Christmas project and I am using Adobe Illustrator with Adobe Photoshop to make graphics. My story so far. I went to a mainstream school and after I finished school I studied at MCAST for 5 years. I studied for 2 years in the pathway course, then I studied ICT for 3 years. I completed ICT studies at level 3. It took me 3 years to get a job after I finished studying. Now I am working at AAC Sapport as ICT support. I have been working for 4 months, since July 2020. Finding a job.
So, Kurt, you took a really, really long time to get a job. How did you feel while you were looking for a job?
I feel very depressed.
That must have been really difficult for you. And now you're working with Agencia Sapport. How do you feel about this job?
Feel really happy.
What makes you happy about this job, Kurt?
Because I H E H P E H H P helped. Help. O others.
Thank you so much, Kurt. That's a really good reason to love your job.
P people.
Yeah, you're helping other people in your job. Thank you very much, Kurt.
With disabilities.
Okay.
I feel AAC system at the workplace. At work, I communicate with my colleagues via email and face gestures. I do this using my laptop, which is special communication software called the Grid 3. As I cannot use my hands, I use my eyes to use the computer. This equipment is made by Tobii Dynavox. To write emails for work, the Tobii device which tracks my eyes works with software on my laptop. There is a panel on the left from which I can choose left click, right click and double click like a standard mouse. My eyes act as mouse. Please see the picture on the left. The Grid 3. I use my laptop to communicate my needs to my personal assistant, such as telling her that I would like to go to toilet. I also use the Grid 3 software to communicate with my colleagues at work. In the Grid 3 there is a lot of buttons called cells with words in them which enable me to choose words to form sentences. I'm also able to write sentences using the keyboard from the left panel. Sometimes I spell a word because with prediction it is faster, or because there is no picture for the word I want. You will see this in the video I am going to show you. Using the system at work. My feelings.
Okay, Kurt, so can you tell me about what it is like to use your laptop at work?
I N U used. A M Y my. My. A L laptop.
So you use your own laptop for work, right?
S so
That's okay, Kurt. You use your own laptop for work. Is it easy or is it hard to do your job with your laptop?
extremely. H. Hard.
Oh, it's extremely hard. Okay.
Or
Can you tell us why?
B.
It's extremely hard for you. What makes it so hard?
B. Because. I. Haven't. You.
Haven't used
S. Don't.
Okay.
N. Not.
So it's uncomfortable to use the laptop at work.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Kurt.
My dream. I want to study some more part-time. I want to do a level 5 course in graphic design. I would love to meet more people with disabilities, maybe even meet a girlfriend. I might even start working on a website to help people with disabilities make friends. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Grayson and Sharon, for the thought-provoking presentation and for sharing the research with us all. A huge thank you also goes to Kim for the wonderful and amazing insight that you shared with us, for sharing your experience with us, and for also sharing the amazing photography and artwork that you produce yourself. It's actually a great honor for us to have seen your artwork. A thank you also goes for Kurt for his testimony and for being so kind to also share his experience with us today. It is now time to answer your questions that we have received throughout the course of this online seminar today. So now I will be giving the floor back to Sharon Borch-Kembry, who will be moderating this Q&A part of the online conference, who will also then proceed with concluding this seminar. Sharon. Mike, Sharon, please.
Yes, thank you. So we are going to answer some of the questions that we received, both through some of the messages we had prior with starting this conference, and also those who have been sent throughout today. So I'm going to start addressing some questions to Dr. Maya Jules. The first question is, unfortunately, the service from ACTU is not regular because obviously of their caseload. So it's our caseload, but we really need their service as a school. So what can we do? It would be good if they can do some school observation so that they can really understand the particular child's needs. May. So can we have May?
Okay, so I think this is a really interesting question, because we need to talk a little bit maybe about what ACTU's function is and what our service does. So yes, ACTU's role is to assess children for AAC and EAT, so electronic assistive technology. So we provide two services there. Our referrals for AAC come through a speech and language therapist, which means that we would be working in tandem with a speech and language therapist to establish what kind of systems would best suit a child, or maybe it's going to be an intervention or a strategy. And then when we've completed our assessment, and that assessment is done usually with both OT and speech and language, we would involve the school in that assessment. Once we've come to a final solution for a child, then what we would do is, if necessary, write a report for funding. And once the parents have bought the equipment, then our role is to be there to support the initial implementation of that equipment. So that might mean that we customize the device to make sure it has the words that the child needs. Or it might need specific settings for the child to access it correctly and most efficiently. Right, but we would be working with the speech and language therapist, and it would be the speech and language therapist's role to actually start setting language goals and communication targets. And eventually, from our end, we would just provide technical support, or maybe a review if it's necessary down the line, because we all know that technology has a shelf life, and it's possible that we might need to relook at the technology a child has.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. May. And we have another question, I think, which flows after this actually question. So how we actually decide on which AAC system to use with a particular child. So it's, yes. Okay,
so in terms of making a choice of what AAC system or strategy, because I'm going to say strategy because it could be, doesn't include a system, it could be signing, for example. What we need to do is we start with the child, and we'll be assessing the child to see what their capabilities are. So what can this child do, and what maybe are some difficulties that the child has. But we don't stop there. What we also do is start to assess also other things, like the environments that the child finds himself in. So this includes the school, the home, and also we would be wanting to know a little bit about maybe parents' ability to cope with technology. What is the school's rules on technology coming in the school? We look at things like, how has the child behaved in the past with AAC? Was there success with the previous system, or was there a difficulty with actually implementing a system? And if so, what that difficulty was, so that we can see what's the best way forward. In getting all this information though, a therapist then needs to kind of cross-match this with all the information of all the different kinds of AAC systems and strategies that exist out there. And not only knowing that something exists, but knowing what's the evidence for any of these practices, or for this particular device, or for this particular way of organizing vocabulary on a device. And only after we've done all this can we start thinking, okay, let's try this piece of AAC, this equipment with this child. Sometimes, once we've tried a few things in a face-to-face session, we might decide, well, let's see what happens if this device is with the child in his home and in his school for a couple of weeks. So we often do what we call trials to see how a child responds to a particular piece of equipment, and also to see what the families think about this. And it's only after we've done that that we can maybe start to conclude. Of course, if the trial isn't working out, we might actually have to think about another system. Sometimes we may have to borrow equipment from abroad. So choosing the right AAC equipment or strategy, or sometimes it's a combination. It could be that we're saying, yeah, let's have this child continue to use some signs and continue to point, but also let's introduce a communication board, or let's try out a high-tech device and keep a communication board for other times. So it's quite a complex process and requires a lot of specialist knowledge, because we need to know everything that's out there in terms of systems and strategies and the evidence for them. And because this is such a fast-moving field, it is something that we have to keep in touch with the whole time.
Thank you, Dr. May. And I have one last question for you. This question is about actually your presentation. Do you have any recommendations for altering the behaviors and attitudes of children who adopt a mini-carer approach?
I do think that for some of us, for some children, being a carer comes naturally, and there's not much you can do about that. The question is, how can you move this forward into friendship? How can we go beyond friendship? Because being a carer is not going to be something that's sustainable in the long term. And I think a lot of it comes from the way that we interact, how we encourage those initiations between that child and the child who maybe has difficulty speaking. Modeling as well, and showing children what is good practice around friendships, and just maybe encouraging the child who is an AAC user to take turns using his system and allowing him to be able to express what he wants to express, and making sure he has what he needs in the device to be able to express those things. And maybe, if necessary, practicing with the child how he can say those things at times outside of when he's with kids, so it's a safe place.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, that's a very good strategy, Dr. May. Thank you for your time. And now I have some questions that I'm going to address to Martina. So, Martina, I have also a couple of questions for you. And the first one is any guidance that you can offer, Martina, on how one can facilitate play when the child has physical, visual, and cognitive impairments?
Thank you, Sharon. Quite an interesting question, and quite a challenging one, I would say. Someone with physical, visual impairment and learning disabilities. So over here, I think probably this child has PMLD probably, so we need to go back to the basics. I would probably tackle this as I would with any other child, really. So first we need to think of the reinforcers of that child. What does the child really like? And when it comes to someone with such disabilities, we can make reference to some research, and as it states that children with corticovisual impairments probably show preference to light, and they might be able to see some light color. So you might want to investigate this a bit further with your children, maybe see if they're showing some preference to certain colors as opposed to others, or if they recognize some objects and how they react to different lights. So I would probably first think on these lines and see how children react to them, and then obviously try and identify some reinforcers which the child would like. Something down the lines of lights and sound and sensory toys. I can think of, at the top of my head, sensory blankets which the child can put on and explore, and they would obviously explore the different sounds and the different textures. And probably, if we go back to my presentation earlier and we're thinking down the lines of play, modeling and AAC, we would want to try and engage the child into some sort of communication. So probably over here I would think of introducing some big mechs, some mid-tech devices, to try and encourage some communication, provide opportunities for communication. So over here, if the child likes music, probably I would model more maybe and see how the child would react to this. Obviously, this is just one example of how we can incorporate AAC to the technology and this disability. But I think we would probably go down to the basics and start from here. What does the child like, the reinforcers, and keeping everything in mind, as I said.
Thank you, Martina, for that. Yes, it is a challenging question, and especially when you are working with children also who have visual impairment, but also physical disability, and they are non-verbal, then it requires a bit more creativity. And I think a bit more observation. We need to be very patient and observe our children and see how they react, as you, Martina, has advised. We have another question, Martina. It is, how can we support the use of AAC during this time, the COVID-19? How is it? How can we support it? Because it's very difficult. Some families are afraid, or because of even the child is vulnerable, they are not going to places. And also, even we know our experience, even in schools, the way we can observe is now different. We can really go into the classes because of the bubbles, and they are we can go to the school, but obviously it is limited what we can do. So how can AAC be support in this time? Thank you, Martina.
Thank you, Sharon. Another interesting question, and one which is very current with the times we're experiencing. Unfortunately, COVID hasn't been easy on anyone, let alone the children we support in schools. So I would obviously try and think how we can be of support. So first of all, we need to still keep in mind the goals with which the child is currently targeting and which what we want to work on with our children. So I would encourage the parents and the team who is supporting the child to speak to the child's speech therapist, so that they can together discuss the goals, especially if there are some current challenges which COVID has brought, so that they can discuss together how these can be tackled. If the children are not going to school, which is something which is happening right now, of course, in view of what is happening, we would still encourage to keep AAC going at home. So, like I suggested earlier in my presentation, keep modeling, keep speaking to your children through the device, keep providing opportunities for communication, and keep interacting with your children. So just as you would on a back in January when COVID wasn't with us, and just keep going basically. Now and even before, but especially now, I encourage sanitization of devices, and maybe we can recommend the use of styli, and maybe if the children are still going to school or if they're attending any other places, I encourage parents to provide styli to therapists or to the school team, so that like that we're reducing we're reducing we're being more safe, basically. If we're thinking down the lines of training, there are lots of online webinars and resources which you can resort to, and I take this opportunity to direct you to the ACTU webinars, which are now on YouTube and also can be found on the Agencia Sapport website, because there is lots of useful training over there which you can refer to and take some ideas from. I hope I answered the question. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Martina. That was very informative. Now I have some questions for Jamie side. And if actually one of them has just, I'm going to start actually with the one that has just we entered actually now. So this person is asking if a child can say words with a lot of prompting, but is mostly non-verbal if left alone. So do you encourage speech or do you use device?
So there are two sides two ways of answering the question. It depends really and truly, because I'm not sure if I understood the question. It depends whether the child that this person here is talking about depends whether he already has a device. If he doesn't have a communication device, from what this person is saying, it might be that he is in need of an AAC assessment, basically. Obviously, it's safe to say that when a child is relying on prompting to communicate, we can say that it's not very functional, is it? We strive a lot towards our children being independent communicators, and in this case, it doesn't seem like the communication is very independent. So in that case, if he doesn't have a communication device, I would highly encourage this child to be referred for an AAC assessment. Also, I'm not sure exactly why the child obviously is relying on prompting, but it can be that if an AAC device is introduced to this particular child, for example, it can be, it doesn't necessarily mean that the child is going to stop talking, but on the other hand, AAC can help to further enhance his verbal output. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind. On the other hand, if the child has a communication device, I'd say encourage both. I mean, obviously, if a child has a communication device but is speaking, we like to encourage both, basically. So the use of the communication device and the use of speech, basically.
Thank you, Jamie. And in fact, this is very interesting, Jamie, because we've seen even through our work that even the children who work who are what we call minimal verbal, or as this person said, prompting on, they have to prompt them to speak. When we use the AAC system with them, then some of them, they actually speak. Then they will be able to, then by seeing it written or by seeing it in pictures, they will be able also they will be also be able to verbalize when through the aid as well of the device. As you said, Jamie, the use of the device will not limit a person to speak. We have another question, Jamie. So it's about play, it's about your presentation. How can one successfully encourage play with toys, etc., with a child who prefers using a device for play? Here I'm understanding. Actually, I continue read. Would you say that using solely a device for play is less beneficial for the child than typical play? I am understanding that device here, we are speaking about tablets. We know that now most of the children are hooked on tablets, the use of and games on tablets. So if someone is, or maybe YouTube, because YouTube is one of the most reinforcers. So if someone is hooked on a tablet and that is the only way of playing, how can we encourage him to play with toys, or how to go about it? Jamie.
All right. So First of all, I always like to follow the child's lead during therapy, obviously during intervention. So if a child is, this child in particular, maybe if a child is using to use his tablet during the session, I mean, I would just follow the child's lead. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not beneficial for the child. But if you are going to use a tablet in this case, you can always adopt strategies that we've covered during this conference. So, for example, prompting, you can always use such strategies. And apart from that, you can always pair the use of the tablet with a particular toy. For example, I don't know, you might want to use the tablet to record the message so that then the child can activate the message on the tablet, and with that message he can activate another toy, for example. So like that you are using the tablet in conjunction with another toy. So I hope that answers the question. But yes, Sharon, I understood it the way you did. By device, I meant tablet, using a tablet.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Jamie. And yes, and I think you showed a really nice example. The video you showed in your presentation, it was about the story, the sensory story, when she was using a book and then also pairing toys with the book and to make it a bit more central. I think the same method can be used even when when our children are using the tablet. So even if they are watching a video like Peppa Pig, for example, and most of the time they have these toys as well, so you can get them around and use them accordingly. And last question, Jamie, what funding is available in Malta to support the purchase of assistive technology and augmentative and alternative communication?
Okay, so before going into the funding options, I would just like to remind the people out there that many a times before we actually go to the funding phase, you might want to keep in mind that maybe some therapists here from ACTU might want to explore other options which don't necessarily involve money. So I'm referring to the borrowing of equipment and, as May mentioned, trials. So I just want to I thought I'd mention that again before delving into funding options. So with regards to funding, we are very, very well aware that many a times the AAC systems that we recommend can be very, very, very costly. We also understand that not everyone is in a position to pay for these communication devices. Communication devices vary very much in pricing. They can go up to thousands. So when we recommend a piece of equipment, we highly encourage the parents or whoever it is to apply for funding. So if I had to refer to one source of funding, it's through the funding of a scheme from Agenzia Sapport. It's called the Empowerment Scheme. So usually we start by referring the parents to apply for the scheme. It doesn't necessarily cover all the costs, but it helps a great deal. After that, we might want to encourage the parents to refer to a second type to a second source of funding. And for that, we refer them to the Malta Community Chest Fund. And they also usually help in funding of such communication devices. It's not always the case, but usually they try to. So when parents start with the empowerment scheme and they get an X amount, usually Malta Community Chest Fund try their best to maybe fork out the rest of the money, but it's not always the case. It depends on a number of factors. But yes, we fully understand, and I understand obviously where this question is coming from, and I think it's a very good question for everyone to know.
Thanks, Jamie. And yes, this is something sometimes this funding, and actually rather than funding, the cost, sometimes it lets people kind of like stay away from referring because they are afraid that they don't have the money or they can't really go for something like this. But as you said, and also I can conclude on this, that not all AAC systems are at a high cost, and obviously this depends on the child. And as we say to everybody, let's do the assessment, let's see the outcomes of the assessment, and then finally when we come to the options, or sometimes it would be more than one option, but sometimes it would be only one option, which is which matches the abilities of that person, and then we can look into the funding. But yes, we can support the process of the funding and guide the people to the funding. So we've come to the end of this seminar. I think it was a very fruitful morning, and thank you all for attending and for listening to us. We have learned a number of things. We have learned about play and how to use AAC, even to support play. We've also looked also how AAC system can support learning. From primary up to post-secondary, and also relationships. And I think relationships happen from when we are young up to when we are adults. Relationships are so important for us, and this is makes us as part of our community. And finally, Siobhan Long, she started with her keynote. It was so interesting, but I wanted to mention it at the last because I think, yes, I think every one of us has a role in supporting the use of AAC. Everyone can do, but I think, yes, we need to look further into putting assistive technology and the use of AAC as a national agenda. And hopefully, I think we hope for this future. Thank you all, and I wish you a nice evening.